Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us today. We have a very special guest today, being Guy Albertson from my interview, and we're going to dig in a little bit deeper about digital interviewing and job recruitment in a digital environment. So with advancements in technology and changes in recruitment processes, recruiters and hiring managers are increasingly moving towards video interview technology to pre-screen applicants, as well as conducting interviews. Many international students and graduates may not have been involved in professional Australian job interviews yet, and may not know what to expect from this process. It is extremely important that you become familiar and comfortable with not only the interview process itself, but also the technology used in the process to ensure that you perform well and you can make a good impression. This can be a little trickier than face-to-face interviews, but you can also use it to your advantage. I'm Jared Holland and co-founder of Outcome.Life, and I'm joined today by my business partner, Dominic Saporito. You can see on your screen. Outcome.Life was founded in 2015 with a grand mission of helping international students get career-related employment. We do this through running lots of networking events, webinars like this, facilitating high-quality internships, running industry-based projects, and also we run a startup pre-accelerator for international students that are actually interested in starting their own businesses. And you might get inspired by Guy today, who has successfully founded a brilliant business. If you do have any questions today, there is a chat icon at the bottom of your screen. Please post them in there. Dom is there, excited to read them. And for anyone that's been on our previous webinars, you will know that we pretty much answer everyone's questions. So we'll do our very best. So if you do have some questions, please write them in there and we will address them as we go, not necessarily waiting till the end. We'd also love to hear about what you're studying, if you are still studying or if you graduated, but also what you're studying. It's really helpful for us to get an idea of the people that are on the webinar as to what your backgrounds are. Today's webinar is brought to you by Study New South Wales. The New South Wales government established Study New South Wales in 2014 to improve the quality of the experience for international students while studying in New South Wales. One of their 4 pillars is to deliver strategies and programs to improve the experience of international students in New South Wales. And the team has been working tirelessly to ensure that international students feel supported, particularly during the COVID-19 crisis, and empowering students to come out the other side well prepared to advance their careers. Hence why we're talking about digital interviewing and recruitment today. As I'm sure everyone has already experienced, the world has changed significantly, and some of that change will be permanent. We will not go back to how the world was before. And how companies now interview and recruit students is one of those things that won't go back to how it was. There will always be an element now of it being in a digital environment. Someone at the forefront of digital interviewing and recruitment is Guy Albertson and the business that he founded, My Interview. So some of the things we're going to cover with Guy today are the future of interviews and the rise of the digital, how to represent yourself when confronted with digital interviewing, the types of digital interviews, how to predict the types of questions you might be asked, how to adequately prepare for a digital interview, what to have ready during the interview, how you can actually use a digital video interview to your advantage, what not to do in a digital interview, and how to impress your interviewers and set yourself up with the best chance of employment. So how to give yourself that competitive advantage. I'm going to throw over to Guy now very shortly, but quickly a bit of background on Guy. He's an entrepreneur and technology expert with experience in building scalable technology products. As a co-founder of My Interview, Guy is instrumental in setting the product and technology strategy of the company and managing its success. Guy holds a Bachelor of Business and Bachelor of Information Technology, majoring in Financial Services and Information Systems from the University of Technology, Sydney. A couple of more interesting things about Guy. He is an absolute avid tennis player, and you'll find him in Centennial Park most weekends with his wife and his puppy. We'll definitely be asking you what type of puppy you have, Guy, and also who your favourite tennis player is. And in better times, he's travelled to over 28 countries. So when I lived in London for a couple of years, I did 35 cities in 2 years, and I think Guy might have me well and truly covered by the 28 countries you've already covered. So enough from me. Guy, over to you. Well, first of all, what type of puppy do you have? Who's your favourite tennis player? And then I'd love to know how you are and how you've been dealing with this COVID-19 situation.
Thanks, Gerard. Really appreciate being here today. Thanks to Outcome.Life and Study New South Wales. Thanks for hosting me. So firstly, to the type of dog I have, it's a toy cavoodle. It's about this big. He's only about 10 months old. So it keeps us very entertained during kind of the COVID-19 ISO life at the moment. And my favorite tennis player, definitely Roger Federer. He just executes well, cool, calm, and collected on the tennis court. So it doesn't really put a foot wrong. And he still plays as good as he did a decade ago. It's pretty scary.
Yeah, amazing. Guy, you founded your own startup and you're seriously passionate about what you do. Talk us through your career journey from school to uni and what you did in between starting your business and how you've ended up in interview software.
Sure, yeah, it's a really interesting story. So Benji, my co-founder, and myself in high school, years and years ago, we knew we wanted to kind of do something in the kind of job space. We kind of just have this burning passion. Then I went into university, as you said, and kind of did a degree, which I think was just helpful to understand kind of interests of mine. So looking at kind of technology has always been something I've had a burning passion for. So I wanted to kind of pursue that, but also I knew that I might get into some sort of business context one day, whether it's running a business. And I thought if I have a business degree, it might help shape my story. Why we went into kind of interviewing software and building a startup was purely just from our frustration. We were disgruntled job seekers. We were finishing towards the end of our degrees, started to apply for a job, and Benji and myself, similar type of backgrounds, but very different people. We have different degrees and different interests, but we kind of almost look the same on paper, and our resumes are identical. We kind of have a bachelor in something, or we have a degree in something, and how do you kind of tell us apart? So that was kind of our pushing off point, is to say, well, if we feel like this, surely other candidates are having this type of issue with presenting themselves and with wanting to show their ambition and motivation. And how do you do that in recruitment? And also for employers, it's how do they assess candidates? How they're starting to differentiate between what I am, if I'm applying, and Benji, and who would you take forward to the next stage in the interview process? So that's kind of been my story as to what really pushed us off into starting my interview. And now we're basically in a place where we have a team across Tel Aviv and Sydney. We have about 1,500 clients. We've done about 700,000 interviews. So we're always trying to see how can we empower candidates to tell their story and put their best foot forward ultimately when they're doing a job interview.
So it sounds like you scratched your own itch.
Yeah, literally. It was just, we thought we got to do something about it. And, I think we're kind of really lucky today. Technology is easily accessible. If you have a passion, you can follow it. You don't necessarily have to put it on the back burner, and you can give it a go. And I think ultimately that's a value that we all should have. Why not? Just give it a try.
Yep. So have you ever had a professional job? Have you ever worked for someone else?
I have. I have. So yeah, I worked in telecommunications for a few years, for about 5 or 6 years across sales and product roles. So for like major telcos in Australia and also major manufacturers. My first job, just in case it is relevant, was working for Baskin-Robbins, scooping ice cream at about 15 years old. So, learned a few things there, but it was a long time ago.
So Guy, if I can, just so that everyone knows how this works today, we've already got one question. That's a really good one. It actually says that given that this is becoming more and more prevalent, online interviews, should we be buying specific hardware in order to make the experience better? Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't know that any of us have got any specific hardware. I'm just using my, low spec MacBook Pro. Seems to be okay. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've seen this massive change in technology probably since we started the company until now. And that was probably over the last 4 to 5 years. I mean, the type of hardware that we use, we use our mobile phones these days for kind of, video calling friends and family and kind of doing all sorts of video content. I don't think we need to buy anything. I think that's the kind of beauty of it, is just pick up your phone, you can do an interview, open your laptop screen, you can do an interview. I don't think you can even necessarily buy webcams that sit on top of computers these days. It's all, it's all built into your device. And that's how it should be, right? It should be easily accessible. And that's a premise that we build on. But more importantly, if you're going to be screening candidates, it should be easily accessible. It doesn't matter where you are in the world, what time of day it is, just pick up the device you have and you should be able to do an interview.
And the quality of phones these days, people, and I'm actually old enough to know what a digital camera was, the silver box digital cameras. And they came and went within a decade because the cameras on phones are just so brilliant now. You don't need cameras anymore. In anticipating what some of the questions were going to be, Guy, we really appreciate you actually preparing a couple of slides. that outlines the lay of the land, that we think about what the challenges are and what the opportunities are, and where the world's headed. And so we might even just throw over to that guy, and you can sort of talk through everything, and then we're going to fire some questions at you after.
Sure. So I'll just share my screen and it should come through in a moment. Brilliant. So we should be able to see my screen now, correct?
Yes, it's amazing when technology works. Yeah.
Yeah, funny story. You mentioned about the camera before. I remember when we were traveling for so long, we used to have those box digital cameras you talked about. And, you know, you had to upload photos to, you know, Facebook or whatever service we were using back then. You'd spend hours and hours and hours and hours in like an internet cafe, just to show my age a little bit. But things have changed, luckily, for the good. And now you can do it on the go.
Yeah, there's probably some people in this webinar that don't know what an internet cafe is. But whenever I travel, one of the things you'd search for as soon as you get to a city is where is the closest internet cafe, and that was the only way you could access the internet.
Exactly. Keep in touch with family and, you know, worried parents, of course, when you're traveling. Fantastic. Yeah, I'm just going to kind of go through now just a little bit about my interview story, but also ultimately how we can help you. So we know that in this type of environment, there is a lot of candidates that are applying for jobs, looking for jobs, and you're probably learning how do you upskill yourself, how do you prepare best for an interview. That's what we're going to be going through today, and there'll be lots of kind of questions that can come through from the audience. So the premise of my interview is, you know, we want to help you introduce who you really are. And, you know, this is kind of the world that we live in. Is, you know, imagine being able to introduce yourself through video, rather than relying on a resume. And a resume doesn't necessarily introduce who you are. It doesn't showcase your passion. It doesn't showcase your motivation, ambition for certain types of roles, or tell your story. And this is ultimately why my interview exists, is we want to help you say goodbye to kind of text job applications and say hi to video. And it's a new format and medium for you to be able to help you get your next job. We know there's a challenge for hiring. So just to provide context is from the hiring perspective and the hiring community, the challenge they face is that hiring talent's changing. You can be based anywhere these days when you want to work for a company, and we'll touch on that for a moment. Companies are struggling to identify candidates who apply through CVs. You can get really nice looking CV generators and resume generators these days, but it's really hard for them to understand your authenticity and why do you want to work for such company. Qualified candidates as well. So there's a number of different ways that companies are qualifying candidates, and I think they're really trying to understand, you know, do you fit that kind of company culture? Do you fit the company values? You might not necessarily have skills or experience, but how do we kind of match you based on those attributes? And a lot of companies and employers are happy to invest in training the right type of talent. So you don't necessarily have to think, I don't have experience for this particular position. I saw something on LinkedIn the other day which talked about a technology which was only built about 1.5 years ago, yet the job description said you need 4 years of experience with it. So it just kind of shows you often some people get things wrong in job descriptions, and don't be put off. You know, 4 years of experience doesn't necessarily make you any better than someone who has 3 years of experience. So that's something I just want to kind of hammer home. And ultimately, a lot of employers want to make hiring decisions based off data. So they want to be able to understand candidates that are coming through. They want to be able to collaborate with other people in the team. So often when they're reviewing your application or they're going to be interviewing you, it might not just be one person. There could be a couple of people that are reviewing your video interview or joining into that video interview. So it's just something to be mindful of when you are going through kind of recruitment processes. We know the future of work is changing. And this is from a study that we kind of pulled off the web from quite an authoritative source, a partner of ours. And we can see that remote work, it's been a huge term that's changed probably since COVID-19 happened. And it's probably for the better. There's been a shift in the last probably 12 months to 18 months where organizations are happy to have people that don't necessarily have to be in the office or be in the same city to work for the company. And we know this is going to be a big shift for organizations moving forward, that they're going to start to adopt working from home practices, flexible work practices, especially for the people that are joining this webinar today. You know, if you could apply for a job in Melbourne, you could apply for a job in Brisbane, you could apply for a job in Hong Kong, you could apply for a job in Singapore, Cape Town even, you know, and organizations are a lot more opening for this. And I think that's really important to note. I know when I first probably started to look for jobs many years ago, it was kind of in the office, 9 to 5, if not longer, of course. And the mandate was you're going to be there full time. And, you know, we can see, for example, a lot of candidates and a lot of students in particular want more flexible work. You want to work for a great company overseas. So, it's really a good time now to start to think about, what are the types of companies you want to work for and not necessarily where they're based.
And guys, since the pandemic started, I've seen that Twitter's CEO has come out and said that he doesn't expect any staff to ever go back to the office if they don't want to. And Worley was similar. Worley's a big engineering consulting company, and engineering is traditionally like you are definitely on site or in the office for engineering, but expects only 50% of staff to ever go back to the office. And I think what the pandemic has shown us is that the naysayers out there, so the managers that are out there that didn't trust their staff enough to let them work from home, have realized that, oh my goodness, my staff are actually more productive at home than they can be in the office. And so we're seeing this huge shift that you're talking about now towards remote working, and how managers and line managers and CEOs of businesses are now not just open to it, they're actually encouraging it.
Definitely. And I think you're going to start to see, we've seen businesses overnight had to adapt to this. They had to build in processes. They had to get laptops sent to staff if they were using desktops. So there was this massive shift that happened. And then all of a sudden people realized, oh, wow, we can actually be productive. We don't need to micromanage our staff. And I think if you have the right practices in place, if you've got the right systems to help you work remotely, and we've seen this across government to small startups to enterprise, they're all doing it. Often, I think what's going to happen is you'll find some teams will go back a couple of days a week. There's always people who like to be in the office. They like the buzz of the office. And I think, organizations will adapt so you can kind of pick and choose potentially how you want to work.
I'm just sick of international roast coffee, Guy. I'm looking forward to getting back to that beautiful coffee machine. A great question from Carolina, who asks, how can I show I'm adaptable at teleworking if I haven't had any previous experience working remotely? Now, I got two great answers for this, but Guy, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. It's something we'll touch on a bit later, but ultimately everyone has also worked remotely when you're doing university assignments. I think people play down their university experience a lot, but ultimately think about how you work with a group. You do group assignments, you might jump on a Facebook Messenger video call, you might jump over Google Docs. Effectively, you're doing the same thing as teleworking, right? You're kind of working remotely, working distributed, working collaborative as a team. And I think students need to dive into experience from uni and talk more about that. Rather than saying, I don't have experience in it, you might talk about, for example, look, I haven't worked remotely before in a professional work context. However, at university, I worked as a team for 4 years or 3 years as a degree. Every assignment's pretty much remote.
Yeah. But to the point of what you're going to be showing a little bit later, that if and I've been a recruiter before. I had a recruitment agency for 14 years, probably placed 1,000 people into jobs in accounting in particular. And if I had 999 paper resumes and I had one video resume introducing themselves, that definitely shows that you've adopted this new wave and that you're ready to work remotely. So,
Definitely.
For Carolina, differentiating yourself and showing that you've adopted the technology and this new way of working. It doesn't matter that you haven't worked remotely. You're demonstrating that you're ready to go out and do it. And the other one, Jared, this might be one for you, is that if you don't have work experience, what should everybody do? Internships.
Yeah, well, internships is absolutely, it's a great way to get experience, and we've had to adapt our business in doing remote internships, and we're finding that students are absolutely excelling at it. Many are getting job offers even though they've been in a remote environment. And I also think, Don, part of the answer to your question is your personal life as well can be impacted. I know there is a lot of people struggling during this pandemic, and there's been a lot of mental health issues. And I know of lots of people that have been providing guidance and coaching to people very close to them on Zoom or on video conferencing. That is another representation about how you're adapting to the digital environment to actually solve problems. So there's lots of different ways and things that you're doing out there that then relate back to the workforce.
Wonderful. Sorry, Guy, for that. This is good. Keep your questions coming through, everyone. We love answering questions.
Brilliant. So I'll just move on to kind of what my interview is and how we want to make sure that candidates feel like the number one. And I think this is important, is that you need to focus on yourself when you're doing an interview. It needs to be in kind of a short, sharp experience. And ultimately, our mission as to what we build in products is to make it more holistic than a resume. So you're not just provided with just a resume when you're applying for a job. You can do as Dom just talked about, and introduce yourself, talk about your passions, your motivations, and what you're interested in. So we know that often when you go through an interview process, doesn't matter if it's face-to-face or digital, it can feel like this, that you're the little small person on the screen being kind of watched over and constantly analyzed. And we're going to hopefully alleviate some of these fears and anxiety that you have, and make you feel more comfortable in going to this. Just as comfortable as you feel picking up your phone and jumping on a FaceTime call with your friends or family. It needs to feel like that type of thing in a more professional context, of course, but that familiar experience. So we're going to go through what should you do? How do you prepare for interviews? How do you answer the question? But also, when you're on the screen, how do you maintain consistent screen presence to make sure you're not jumping around the screen the whole time? And often it comes down to what we did a little bit earlier today, practice. Just test out the technology before you join the call. Test out the interview technology, if it's a live interview, if it's a one-way interview before you join the call. And kind of just get your screen set up, get your background, make sure it's a clear background to some capacity, make sure you're not in kind of like a messy room. And just, there's a couple of key things you can do. And it helps you, number one, feel more comfortable. It helps you prepare, and make sure you're not kind of rushing and joining any live interview. We're going to talk about what not to do. So, we don't want you, for example, to miss your time limit. So if you've got a 1 hour call or you've got a 30-minute interview, time's important. If you're doing a one-way interview, which is where the questions show up on the screen, and you'll see this in a moment, you have a timed response. So you might only have 30 seconds to give an answer. You might have a minute to give an answer. So make sure you don't miss the time limit and you provide your response in a concise format. You don't want you to make love to the camera and get all really up into the camera like this.
What was that, Guy?
We just want you to, sit back, be in a comfortable environment where your shoulders are visible on the screen. And it's just important because, if you're going to be showing, as Dom mentioned before, one of the students asked, how do you make sure you're kind of ready for telework? Just getting yourself ready on the screen is important, and making sure you're not going to join these calls like this. We don't want you to talk a lot and say nothing. So your word choice is important. We don't want, you don't want to waffle. If you don't know the answer, you can also say to them, look, could you explain the question in a different way? So if it's a live interview, of course. If it's a question that's difficult, don't beat around the bush. Try to answer it in the best way possible, and draw on past experience from university as well.
I've got an example about that guy. When I was in London, I was interviewing at one of the investment banks, and they asked me a question about when have you had to be diplomatic? And I had a brain fade. I just lost what the word diplomatic meant, and I answered it as if the question was about being ruthless. And so I answered the question complete, and rather than saying, look, I'm sorry, can you explain what diplomacy means? I've sort of just lost my track. And the lady interviewing me within 30 seconds got up and walked out of the interview. So big mistake, just if you don't understand something, there's something as simple as that. Just to say, can please repeat the question in a different way.
And as a recruiter, I'm often, especially if it's a technical role, I'm actually trying to find out not only what you know, but what you don't know. I actually expect someone that's a graduate not to know some of the things that I'm talking about. And what I'm really trying to do is to work out who's got the courage simply to say, hey, I haven't dealt with that before, because that in itself is the right answer. So never, ever be afraid to say, sorry, I don't have any experience in that.
Exactly. I mean, no one's supposed to have all the answers in an interview. Companies want to invest in you. They want to kind of help train and develop you, exactly as Dom said. So just be upfront. And I think you need to be yourself. You don't need to be this kind of, dream interview candidate. Just be yourself. And ultimately, that's what companies want to see. So we know there's 3 methods for digital interviewing. So there's one which is one way, which my interview kind of has it built, where you have text questions on the screen and you get taken through a 3 or 4 or 5 questions up to 10. It's very popular for graduate jobs. It's very popular for internships. And also for just a lot of companies these days are starting to do this. So that way, when you first apply for a job, they can learn more about you. They can understand what motivates you and your ambitions. That's one method that we're going to talk about today. The other, of course, is 2-way, where you have like, you know, any typical Zoom or Skype call or FaceTime call where it's yourself and maybe somebody else or two hiring managers that are going to be interviewing you. And one that we're starting to see more of is we've always had group interviews in person. And where, you know, you go into an office, there might be 10 of you and they run an assessment center. But I think we're going to start to see, and there's been trends in this already the last few months, digital versions of this. And it's important because you have to build rapport with the other kind of fellow candidates that you're competing against, because they assess these types of things, but also just in terms of how you get familiar with it. So this is definitely something to kind of keep mindful of when you're starting to apply for jobs, about the different methods that companies might use.
That's a really interesting development, Guy, to think that, you know, particularly some of the bigger corporates that used to run recruitment days, you know, where they bring in 50 people and they're assessing them the whole time. But to now do that entire process digitally, that's really changing the way that they recruit.
Definitely. I don't know if it'd be all day. I think that might get a bit much on camera, but I think, you know, it's definitely going to be something that companies have to adapt to, because, you know, we're not sure when we're going to be able to go back into the office. And it also might be a bit more efficient for the candidates and also for the employers as well. So it's definitely something to watch out for. So when we're looking at interviews, and, you know, one of the most important things that you're being assessed for is content. You know, what are you being asked? How are you being asked? And how do you respond? So the most important thing, and something to take away, is you want to stay on point. You know, you need to be able to answer the question that was asked of you. And this goes back to Dom's point before, where he said, you know, you don't want to beat around the bush. Don't want to waffle. If you don't know something, be upfront and tell them. Don't try and make up an answer. People can see through that very, very quickly. And it's really important that you just answer the question to your best of your ability. If you struggle or you're not sure what to talk about, also think about your past experiences. You know, you might have had a job before. Doesn't matter if it wasn't in a kind of professional context. See if there's something you could draw out of that. University provides a lot of opportunity, from working with lecturers, with tutors on an individual level, presentations that you provide, that you do as well, but also how you work with groups and how you work on assignments. So definitely draw on kind of past experiences and use this when you're trying to frame yourself or frame the answer back to the company. Also, screen presence. We touched on this a little bit before, but, you know, we want to make sure you just set yourself up before the interview to make sure that you're relatively an arm's length away from the screen. Make sure you're not up in the grill of the camera. And it just feels like it's natural. So it feels like it's natural when you're responding, but it also feels like it's natural if you're on a live call to the person who's there. So I feel like I'm almost in the same type of room with Dom and Gerard. You know, it's kind of just feels like a natural conversation we're having.
Guy,
Obviously,
sorry, you can't see my setup at the minute, but my laptop is sitting on top of 2 puzzle boxes. We started doing puzzles during COVID-19 because I wanted the camera to be at my eye line. And so yes, I found something that would lift it up, and they're just puzzle boxes. So setting it up in advance is important.
Definitely, yeah. And you can just be creative. Use books at home, puzzle boxes if you've got that. Not everyone has professional laptop stands and all that hardware that Dom said you might have to buy. But if you just check the stuff before the interview, then you set up for success. That's all you need to do. Don't have to do it during the interview and start muddling things around.
But Guy, a big one for me is be human. Yeah. We do not. No one wants to work with a robot. And this is why Gerard and I say all the time that most employers could not care less about your technical skills. An interview is about showing that you're a person. And given that we all work in teams these days, what an interviewer is trying to do is to find out, is this the type of person that's going to work well with my team and also relate with my customers? And so, you know, having fun and being, you know, a real person goes a long way. I think many international students in particular focus far too much on their technical skills. And I often say, the quicker you can get off the topic of technical skills, the better. I would much rather hear that you've gone to the football and you don't understand a thing about it. Ridiculous game which you've enjoyed, but you were there yelling and screaming and having a beer with everybody else. That is more likely to get you a job rather than saying that you know the latest version of Flutter.
Correct. Yeah, I think this comes down to a question that people often get asked around, like, introduce yourself. And what do you talk about? You know, do you talk about purely technical things? And I think you want to be holistic. You just want to cover a couple things. If you're interested in football, didn't know what was going on, that's fine. Any kind of other passions you have and motivations, because you're not just technical at the end of the day, and you're not just interested in this, but there's a whole other area to you. And I think that's really important to focus on.
And as a recruiter of many years, as soon as you are invited for an interview, to me, that says you cover the technical skills. You don't need to talk about them anymore, or not much anyway. Answer whatever direct questions. But now the person is trying to find out about you, whether you're going to fit. Then this is why I love what your business is all about, because it means that you're actually accelerating yourself through the interview process. Again, if I've got 999 paper CVs and I've got one paper CV and I've got a 30-second video of someone introducing themselves, that's the pre-selection done. I don't need to ring you up and book in a time and all that type of thing. So I can't think of a better way for internationals in particular to show that they're worthy than by preparing one of these interviews and sending them in. It's just brilliant.
And it's also the reason why we talked to the start guy about what your interests are, being tennis and you've got a puppy. Instantly, it brought a smile to my face, and I wanted to know who your favourite tennis player is and what type of dog you got. That is a conversation starter that can go for 10 minutes. We could easily talk about that for 10 minutes. It's those personal elements that become really important, whether it's a face-to-face interview or a digital interview. And as Dom said, you're better off talking about that type of stuff than talking about the technical things.
Correct. Because yeah, exactly right. And I think you want to see, that ultimately the interviewer, like from my perspective, when we hire candidates, obviously everyone does their my interviews and then we shortlist into a final one. But when you get to that kind of final stage or that next round, we want to see, like, could I work with this person? Are they going to be able to, as Dom said, gel with my customers, gel with my team, more importantly? Technical stuff, we know they can cover or they can learn it, right? Like, people can learn those things, but it's everything else that comes from working with someone, rapport building, how they're going to communicate with us. Do we all respect each other and build rapport quite easily? And as you said, like, the first 10 minutes of a live interview often might not necessarily be even about the role. It might just be about yourself. So that's also something just to prepare, like, as in just, obviously you know about yourself, but you might just want to think about a couple of things you want to bring up during a live interview.
Yeah, and for international students in particular, never, ever, ever be afraid to talk about your journey here to this country. I mean, this is a very multicultural society here in Australia. And we love to hear about people's journeys and what they've sacrificed, and the fact that, all your family and friends are at home and you've come to this country and you love it and enjoy it. You love the weather. You love being locked down in Victoria, like I am, but, free as a bird up in New South Wales. People love to hear that stuff. So make sure that you bring it out. And a big one, remember to smile. So many times, I know it's stressful, but, people want to work with other people. And just a thing of showing a beautiful smile, I think, can make a massive difference in an interview as well.
Definitely. So we'll move on to exactly this part here. So just be careful.
What is that?
Well, be careful when you're doing an interview. So this talks about context, right? So if you're doing an interview, if it's face-to-face, if it's one way, you probably don't want to do it outside. You probably don't want to, hold the phone right up to your face. Whilst this does show that you're very human and not robotic in that capacity, just think about a couple of things to make the experience slightly more professional when you're doing things.
Hey, Guy, what about doing an interview in the back of a car, given that has happened a hell of a lot recently with some of our interns that are going for internships? Good idea?
I think people are kind of opportunistic in that sense, that maybe it's deadline driven and they only have time to do it in the car. Look, I mean, I think we've seen that as well before with the candidates that come through. I don't think we need to judge it too much. I think it's interesting, right? So I think with students, often what we see, and speaking to partners of ours, is, often it can be an opportunistic interview. So it can just be literally last minute. And you don't want to do things last minute. So maybe they just got a text, they realize it's due in an hour, they're on the way to their current job, they want to get a new job, and then they do it in the car. So I think it probably comes down to the deadline and looking at when did you get the interview. Maybe don't do it in the car. I don't think you're not going to necessarily get the job, but I think maybe just think about context, because it brings all these thoughts into your mind, like, why did they do it in the car?
Yeah.
But maybe that was the only space they had. So
Guy and Dom, you can still prepare for that now, because make sure you get your laptop out, even stream it off your phone if you can, and put a Zoom background on and no one would even know you're in the car. And I think that's the beautiful thing about the world we live in these days. You can find solutions to all these little problems, and that's an easy one to do it. When Guy's not actually sitting in that office, it looks like he's sitting in right now.
Actually at a beach. I just didn't want to tell you guys, all right?
Oh, wow, you got there pretty quick.
And that's an answer to Shireen's question about her background. In her house, her apartment is painted in a very bold colour. Is it a distraction? Maybe, maybe not. But if it is a concern of yours, Shireen, simply use a suitable background like Guy's using at the moment. One that, you know, promotes the professionalism or perhaps the artistry of whatever it is that you're going for. So good question.
Definitely. The next thing we look at is around kind of speech and tone and how do you deliver? And this can be used in any interview context, whether we're in a webinar, whether we're in a one-way interview, face-to-face. But often, like for myself, I know I speak quickly. So one thing I always have to remember is try to speak a little bit slower. And it's really important because if you speak fast or you don't have good cadence when you're presenting, a lot of the stuff you say gets missed. And, you know, the interviewer might not understand what you've said because it's gone so fast. So just be mindful of that. Try to speak a little bit slower and, you know, focus on the important words. Also, don't swallow your words. So just try to make sure that you're pronouncing things as best as you possibly can. And, you know, speak a bit slower. You're always going to naturally probably speak faster in an interview just because it's slightly higher anxiety, which is fine. But if you're just conscious of this and you maybe practice and, you know, we'll talk about how you can do this a bit later on in today's session. And you can also practice with a friend. You can speak to family members and get them to ask you a couple of questions. This definitely helps build your skills. And no one's born a dream interviewer, right? But you definitely can improve. Also, just a couple of things is practice from a setup perspective. So just get everything ready, you know, like the background question before. Think about before where you want to do the interview from. Do you want to do it from your office, your bedroom? Is it clean? Like just that way, at least people can just focus on you and they're not going to be worried about what's happening in the background, which detracts from ultimately your best asset, which is yourself at the end of the day. Depending on the type of interview, you might want to repeat the question. So if it's back to an employer, you might want to just talk about the question and then dive into it. Make 2 or 3 key points. If it's a one-way interview and you've got a time duration, the question's on the screen. So you don't necessarily have to repeat it back because it's right there, but you can bring it into your answer if it's relevant. And depending on how long you've got to talk or you're in a live interview even, you probably just want to think about how do you want to wrap up the question. So don't spend 5 minutes talking about something necessarily. You know, you might spend 2 or 3 minutes, make those points and then wrap it up. So at least it finishes and closes. And you can also end with a smile as Dom said before.
Quick one, you might cover this in a minute, but how important is it for candidates to have some questions ready to ask the person who is interviewing them?
Yeah, it's really important. I mean, I know we ask it a lot when we're meeting candidates in a final round. Even in our one-way, we ask, you know, anything else you'd like to know about us or the company. And if it's through one way, we can get back to them, whether it's over email or a next interview, just about the things they raise. But it's critically important because I think it shows interest in the company. And it could be about different things. You could ask them about their personal journey in a way and be like, you know, when did you start at this company and how have you seen it evolve, etc. You might ask about the opportunity itself and career path progression and skills building. But don't be afraid. You know, don't just do a quick Google search before like best interview questions to ask an employer. Like try to think about what do you really want to know about this company. It might be an out of the box question, which is okay, but it shows interest. And Dom might be able to touch on some more from his recruiting days.
Yeah, and well, here's another question. I'll actually pose this to you, Jared. Talina asks, is it a good idea to connect with the interviewer before the interview?
Yeah, this is an interesting question, and some people passionately think either way about it. I think you should. I think 100% you should. At a bare minimum, you should look up your interviewer on LinkedIn and at least start researching them. The first thing you should look for is, does your interviewer know anyone that you know? A great example might be that I might be applying for a job. It could be Dom who's interviewing me. I'd look at his LinkedIn profile and I see that he knows Guy. The first thing I'm going to go and do, I'm going to reach out to Guy and say, Guy, I've got meeting this guy, Dom Saporito. Do you know him? The guy says, yeah, I know him. I played golf with him last week. Try and find that personal connection. And then at least at a bare minimum, if you've looked at their profile, do not do it anonymously, that a lot of people actually do. I don't believe in that. Do it so that they know you've looked at their profile. So if you're not comfortable in reaching out to them, I would at least look them up on LinkedIn. They will get a notification or they will be in their notifications that you have looked at their LinkedIn profile. I think that's a real positive. If I'm going to interview someone and they've taken the effort to look me up on LinkedIn, I'm actually a little bit impressed by that.
And Jared, can I ask, if someone has had, feels comfortable connecting with you, what is an absolute must that they should do if they're going to connect with you on LinkedIn before the interview?
So this is a good point too, Dom. If they actually connected with me and did not write a message and just connected, I would actually be unimpressed with them when they come to the interview. Because I think, well, you've connected with me, we don't know each other yet, and you couldn't take the 24 seconds to write, hey, Jared, I've actually got an interview with you next Tuesday. I thought I'd connect with you on LinkedIn. I really look forward to meeting with you next week. If you can't take the 24 seconds to write that, I think it actually has a negative impact. So the answer to your question is, Dom, always write a personal note if you connect with someone on LinkedIn.
And of the listeners today, you're welcome to connect with certainly Jared and I think Guy would welcome that as well. But if you are going to connect with us, please make sure you send us a nice little note. And this is really good practice for you. Hi, Dom, thanks for presenting today. Love what you had to say, even if you didn't, regards, whoever, because then I get this lovely photo, a beautiful, polite note. It would be rude of me not to connect with you. And I'm going to put my LinkedIn address so that you can practice with me. You're welcome to.
Definitely. Yeah, really good points. And I think, whether depending on the type of interview format you're doing, if it's one way or two way, whoever signs off from the email, whoever's invited you to the calendar invite, check that out on LinkedIn. Because the worst thing you can do is if you go into that live interview environment and you bump into them at the coffee shop outside or even in the lift and you don't realize that's the person who's going to be interviewing you. Bit of an awkward encounter. Whereas you'd rather just be, yourself and be like, hey, nice to meet you, connect with you on LinkedIn, or you tried to connect with them, but at least you recognize them. And it just breaks down barriers, which means, number one, you look them up, which is important. You know a bit about their story and background. You recognize them, which is super important. The last thing you want to do is be waiting in an interview room and not necessarily recognize someone. Or if it's digital interviewing, of course, then at least you've kind of built a bit of a rapport with them because you've checked them out on LinkedIn before. Some really good points. The next thing is on the go. Where do you say it? We touched on this before. If you're doing things on your phone, definitely set it up against something so you're not kind of holding it for a 45-minute interview. It's going to be difficult and it's just going to detract from the interview quality. So you can rest your phone up against the screen, a mug even, it doesn't really matter. You can rest it up against a laptop screen. We always get asked about if you should do it horizontal or vertical. I think it's much easier if you're using a phone, and we see about 75% of our users do things on their phone. It's just to hold it vertically. Holding it horizontal is just a bit awkward and gets dropped, and we've seen this happen before. So just kind of think about these things before. And even things like earphones, in-ear earphones is probably easier. Giant over-ear ones just kind of take away a bit, or you can just use the speaker on your laptop.
Hey guys,
just a couple of quick tips.
A bit of a difficult question. This is a personal one because I had this experience recently and it was awkward. And you may not know the answer to this, I don't know, but what do you think is the norm with handshaking once we are having face-to-face meetings? But are people supposed to handshake now, or do we not handshake? Are you hearing anything as to what the norm's going to be?
Look, this is something I actually think about quite a lot, even when I see friends of mine. I think we've just been doing the elbow hello, in a professional way. But I think as long as you explain to them, say, look, nice to meet you, and you do that, in a way, or hi, nice to see you, rather than just trying to bump their elbow randomly, I think it's important. I feel like there probably won't necessarily be shaking of a hand as a gesture for some time because, I think it's also a sign of respect potentially that you don't want to shake hands if you at least do the elbow or indicate in another way that you're here, because we just don't know what's happening with this COVID thing, and I think everyone needs to be respectful.
But I think with a lot of students, they often ask me, how do I break the ice with people? And I think even this COVID gives us a wonderful thing that we can play with. When you go in and say, hey, let's touch, and it gets you talking about something other than the skills and the job and whatever, and really can set the tone for an interview. So
definitely,
it's a really good thing.
And I think that's an important segue to also thinking about when you're doing even a live interview and the person might be working from home. It's a point of discussion around COVID and how's family if they have one, or are they working from home? How's it been? Is the company working from home? And you could just talk a few minutes about that. Makes you feel more comfortable and relaxed. Yeah. I know all my meetings typically start off with this stuff. It's just talking about what news of the day in a way, and it's a good icebreaker.
As you go to your next slide, Guy, I'm going to answer 3 quick questions. He asks, is it appropriate, slightly creepy to mention things you saw on the interviewer's LinkedIn? No, it is not. Remember that LinkedIn is their public professional profile. Anything on their profile is up for chat. So don't be afraid of that. I think it's a terrific way, again, to break the ice with someone.
And I've done that before, Dom, as well. That someone that I met, they worked at Royal Bank of Scotland. I worked at RBS when I was in the UK, and I brought that up in a meeting. Said, hey, I saw you used to work at RBS. What years were you there? And we had overlap of about 6 months when we both worked there. So you use it to your advantage. Like it's not a secret.
Yeah,
Definitely.
Another one. Rebecca asks, is it okay to ask someone to repeat the question? Of course it is. You will get a lot of respect if you very politely say, sorry, I just missed that. Can you please ask that question again? And then one of the very good friends of Outcome, Joyce, was told in an interview a few times that her answers were a little bit short. So now what she's doing is that she's asking whether or not that is enough of an answer. You know, do you need to know more about it? And that way it gives her the opportunity, or the interviewer an opportunity to say, no, please expand on that. So thank you, Joyce, for your contribution. And we love you. Hope your job that you got from your internship is going really well.
Brilliant. Yeah, really good points there. And this comes to my last slide, but it's for two things. So one, this is kind of what part of the My Interview experience does look like, where you get taken through this one-way interview. And just so you know, so ultimately, you know, whether you're using any kind of interview product, we want to make sure it's a friendly experience for candidates. You'll be able to see generally a clear timeline. So how much time you have for responses, if you can retake responses, check your volume levels. So ultimately, this is something that you guys can also take away and practice. And I can touch on this later today, but this is there's a way that you guys can go away and just practice interview questions, just so you can see what you look like, how you presented, and experience our technology, but just prepare for any type of interview going forward as well.
Yeah, everyone will get sent a link after this webinar where you can go and practice 4 questions. And I did it last night, and I was doing it on the couch, and Olivia, my partner, was sitting next to me, and she was laughing at me at my answers for some of them. And what it taught me was that I needed to do it a couple of times before I could actually think I'd submit something that was okay. It wasn't perfect. And I think, Guy, that's a point. It doesn't need to be perfect. You don't have to overdo it, because people want to see authenticity. But I did stuff it up a few times. And then after I did it a few more times, I was able to get a bit of confidence in what I was saying.
Exactly. So best thing to do is go practice, look at the type of question. This one here talks about a resume, of course. You know, the number one thing I know for students, whether they're in grad jobs or internships, is, you know, what's on that resume, because you've had to use it to apply anyway. So you can just talk about your skills and interests and your university experience. It doesn't have to necessarily be purely based, I've worked at Baskin-Robbins, for example. That's not on mine, but, you know, you just be mindful about, you know, how far back you go in your story, and just talk about your interests, kind of your skills, and what motivates you.
Yeah, at the same time though, Guy, a lot of our listeners won't have a lot of experience. And so I always say, please be very proud of the work that you've done before. And if you have worked at an ice cream store, or you have worked at McDonald's, I mean, anyone that works at McDonald's is brilliant, because you've had to work in a team, you've had to follow a process, and you've had to deal with the worst people on the planet, which is the public. And so those 3 things, and see what just happened then, guys. See how we laughed, and, you know, we're making a connection, and we're being authentic. And that's what you're trying to get out of. A resume simply can't do this, which is why I love your product. And I love it that, especially international students who are, you know, they're competing with a lot of the domestic students. This is a terrific, very, very, very low cost way for them to differentiate themselves, by recording a 30-second introduction and sending it in with their application.
Definitely. Yeah, and you raise a good point. I mean, obviously my ice cream experience is a long time ago, but, you know, you learn how to work in a team, and you learn process and be responsible. And, you know, whilst you might think, oh, someone else is applying has better experience, don't downplay it. No. I think, and just talk about the skills you've learned, because they're transferable to new roles, and they show you've done something before, which is important.
Dom, you might recall that at a point where we were actually raising some capital, that some investors asked us what was the worst job we'd ever done. And the reason why they were asking that is they wanted to know we'd gone out and we'd sort of, done the grunt work. And I used to steam clean carpets and clean toilets when I was at university. And it's one of the best jobs I've ever had because I did it with some mates and it was so much fun, the people you work with. And I've learnt so much from doing that work. And I know, Dom, you've done some pretty brutal jobs as well. It actually helps with your character and it actually adds a lot to who you are and what you bring to an organization. So never, ever be embarrassed by any work that you've done because all of it is important.
Yeah.
Guy, I want to talk about something you mentioned at the very start when you first put up your slide. And you talked about looking at things from the employer's perspective. And we see all the time students and graduates, because the graduate market is just so hyper competitive. Graduates only really see it from their perspective. So we'll hear all the time, I've applied for 400 jobs and no one bothered to reply to me. And they're really angry and upset. And you say, well, hang on, let's flip this around. Let's think about the employer. They've just received 2,500 applications for 4 roles. If they wanted to reply to every single person, give you feedback on your application, they have to hire a team of 10 people just to do that. It's not realistic for that to happen. So how important is it for students and graduates when they're looking for their professional jobs to actually start thinking about putting themselves in the shoes of the employer? Because then that can change their behavior about how they apply for jobs, whether it's doing deep research, whether it's looking them up on LinkedIn, whether it's maybe sending them a video unannounced, or whether it's trying to find someone else that works in the organization. I just wanted to maybe touch, you see both sides of this all the time, as to putting yourself in the employer's shoes and how that could be an advantage.
Yeah, definitely. And I think a couple of takeaways. So one would be, if you think about it from an employer perspective, they do get a large volume of applications for a lot of different types of roles, and they've got to kind of sift through, applications, resumes, for example. I think employers are trying to get better at getting back to candidates, but sometimes they're not. And that's a big pain point in the industry, which hopefully will be addressed over the next probably 6 to 18 months, where they get back to candidates. But if you're applying for a job and you've used that product, you've used their service, or you want to, you can go and sign up for their product, or you can go and check out their service. Maybe put that into your application in some capacity, whether it's through video and you talk about, I've downloaded your app, I've used your product before. That's why I want to work for you guys, potentially. And often when we speak to employers, they want to see this kind of knowledge, because how else are they going to know? You would have said, damn, if they'd interviewed me, they would have known. Yeah. But you want to get to that point. So if you're using our product in a way, like a one-way interview, tell them then and there. If you're stuck with the application and you put a cover letter on, at least maybe explain it there and personalize it, right? I know it's hyper competitive. You're applying for a lot of different opportunities, but try to do something to stand out, because ultimately, how are they going to know? And, you get frustrated, of course. I had this experience when I was applying, but I'm really passionate about product and technology. But maybe Benji's got more experience. They're going to take him to the interview. But maybe I needed to, change the way that I was putting originally my CV together and my resume, and it was tailored to the job and my passions or interests, or my, back then we didn't have my interview, now we do. But, you could put that together and you could tell them.
Cool. I'm going to just go through 4 quick questions. So Catalina again, I love it that you are standing out and differentiating yourself, Catalina, by asking your 3rd question. Is it okay in an interview to mention that English isn't your first language? Of course it is. And again, just by saying, this is my background and whatever, people are very, very used to accents. So don't be too worried about that. And if you want to say it, no problem at all.
Don't use that to your advantage.
Yes.
Do the positive, right? Tell them what languages you're fluent in. Yeah. I get so impressed by people that can speak 3 or 4 languages, because I can speak 1, and that's English, and I'm actually embarrassed by it. Yeah. So the fact that you can speak 2 or 3 languages, that is an advantage. Use it.
Absolutely.
Yes. I spoke to someone yesterday who interviews. So half our team's based in Tel Aviv, but everyone comes from different backgrounds. They're multilingual, speak French, Russian, Hebrew, Spanish. Awesome. And I interviewed a candidate yesterday, and he speaks about 5 languages. Wow. So it's a great asset to have, to be honest, in this global environment. You're speaking to customers in different countries, you're speaking to partners and work staff in different countries. So don't be embarrassed if you speak multiple languages, or English isn't your first, of course.
The worst thing that will happen is that someone old like me will actually practice any word that they know in your language. And again, it makes that connection. Another one is that John says that he's worried he doesn't have good grades. No one cares about your marks, John. Trust me. No one cares about your marks. No one cares about the uni you go to. They care about you as a person. I failed accounting A at uni and became a chartered accountant. and worked at KPMG and Pitcher Partners. So I'm living proof that you do not need to be good and have good marks in order to get a great job. Lily says she had a professional gap of 6 years doing hospitality jobs. What's the best way for her now to position herself with recruiters? Well, again, consider doing an internship, especially if you're moving from one area into another area. A great way to show people that you're really invested in moving into a different industry. Do an internship if you can. It's not for everyone, but if you can, do that. But I mean, just be open and honest with people. Do not try and cover it up, because that's fraught with danger. And
Durga is the perfect example of that.
Oh.
So Durga was a young gentleman that had a software development background, but for whatever reason ended up in hospitality for seven or 8 years, I think it was. He was living in Melbourne, and he got in the cycle and he couldn't break out back into being a software developer. And so he went and invested into an internship, a 12-week internship at part-time. He converted, it was at a company called Mentor Loop, actually, a tech company. And he converted that internship into a job, got promoted twice within the next 9 months, and was probably earning double within the first year that he was working in hospitality. But because he'd been out of the sector for a while for his profession, he entered back into the profession by doing an internship, and now he's still working there 3 years later as a lead software developer.
Yep.
Yeah.
Another question is, this person's experience is totally different to what they wish to do now. If you're applying, you think that your experiences are very, very different, but remember, dealing with people, working as a team, dealing with customers, it's only the technical that's different. So therefore, don't be too concerned about that. And there was another...
One example, Tom, I'll just raise. So one of the engineers in our team came from a finance background, worked 10 years in finance as a manager in a big bank in France, then moved across, and he wanted to get into become an engineer. So he went through and did an internship to, but also learned himself, if he wants to get into it. There's so many online courses or tools you can do these days. And, all those skills, he managed people. He dealt with people from different business units. He learned all from his previous job. We weren't hiring a banker in our company. We were just hiring someone who was ambitious and curious, and we could tell they were talented, right? He was very early on, but a junior engineer. Some companies might have said, he's junior, but we could see that he's a great engineer. So just think about that from an employer's perspective. That's kind of what they also want to see sometimes. And don't be ashamed about it, and just do your best and explain why you want to move across to a different career path.
And Kochi just asked a quick question. He's got CA qualifications and experience in big 4 firms in Japan, cannot land an interview here in Australia. Kochi, my advice to you is that if you do want to get back into those big firms in Australia, it will be through a 2-step process. Go to smaller firms first, and it may take a year or 2, but trust me, the big firms will come knocking once you've got local experience. But you in particular, Kochi, is someone that I can help with. Please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I'd love to have a Zoom chat with you, and I'll be able to give you some expert advice on how to do that. Jared, it's 12:01, and so we need to be wrapping this up shortly. A few last words?
So from me, Guy, unless you've got anything else that you might want to add it, then I really want to thank you for your time today. It's been amazing insights for me as well. Like, I've learned an enormous amount today, and so I'm sure all the people listening to this webinar have as well. It is a new frontier. It is a bit daunting, but one of the positives too we didn't actually talk about is the advantage of doing a digital interview is you can have all these notes in front of you and no one knows you've got notes in front of you. So you can actually cheat. So there's ways to use it to your advantage. But thank you very much for your time. Thanks for the prep work you put in last night as well to actually put some slides together. And we really do appreciate your insights.
And who do we love? Who do we love, everyone?
Study New South Wales.
Study New South Wales. We love you. Study New South Wales loves you too. Reach out to them if you are having any issues with your education stay here in Australia. They are here to help. They're good people, and we thank them very much for putting on the show today. So,
brilliant.
Right.
Thanks very much for hosting me, guys. Much appreciated. And if anyone wants to reach out or get any tips, feel free to just drop me a little message on LinkedIn.
However, make sure you send a note. Thanks, everyone.
A note. Yes.
Thank you, everyone.
See you then.
See you.